Okay, if everyone could please take your seats if possible. And if there are conversations that you're just dying to dig into further, you can always go outside in the hall. You can't hear. Very low. Can folks hear me now? Okay. Perfect. Thanks, Councilor Lossberg, Von Lossberg. Okay, I'd like to call to order our Monday, July 9th special meeting, public meeting of the Missoula County Board of County Commissioners. Please stand and join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So from staff, are there any public announcements this morning? I would just like to remind folks that we normally do not meet on Monday mornings like this. So if you just have not gotten enough of these public meetings after this session, we have our standard public meeting on Thursday at 2 p.m. where you can hear about claims that have been processed in the last few weeks, subdivision proposals, and more fun and excitement like that. So we have one agenda item today that I'm sure you're all aware of related to placing an open space bond before the voters on the November ballot. But are there any public comments on items not on today's agenda? And this is your opportunity to come on up to the mic and tell us what's on your mind. Okay, seeing none, just a few reminders for folks. If you could, please silence your cell phones. There's a sign-in sheet at the back of the room. If you have not signed in when you came in the door, please do so when you exit. That helps us keep track of who is here, and when you testify, it also helps us know how to spell your names and such. So the one item today, as I mentioned, is to adopt a resolution that would effectively place before the voters, qualified electors of Missoula County, Montana, the question of issuing general obligation bonds of the county in the total principal amount of up to $15 million for the purpose of conserving, enjoying, and enhancing open space lands in Missoula County. And there's lots of folks here today, and I think the way we're going to structure the meeting is we're going to begin, if there's a representative from the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, that representative will share with us, followed by Amber Sherrill of Five Valleys Land Trust, and a few folks, I think, in addition to her, presenting on what will be voted on today. And that will be followed by public comment from anyone else in the audience. I would ask that you reserve or limit your comments to 3 minutes or less, since there are quite a few folks in the audience. And also, if other folks have said the exact same thing as you, please try your best to avoid redundancy. If you have more to share that's different than what you've heard previously, feel free to come to the mic. Otherwise, assume that your sentiments have been noted. So, without further ado, I will open the public hearing. Is there a representative from the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes? Yes, come on up to the mic, please. And everyone, if you could state your name for the record, and if you are representing an organization, please state that also. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jermaine White, and I'm the Information and Education Program Manager for the Confederated Salish and Kootenai Tribes Natural Resources Department. It's my honor to be here today on behalf of the tribes to talk to you about our strong support for Missoula County's open space bond. I'd like to thank the Board of Commissioners for providing this opportunity to comment. The Salish, Kootenai, and Pend Oreille people, like tribal people everywhere, have a rich oral tradition. Our history is oral, our creation stories are conveyed orally, Our knowledge about geography is passed on orally, often through place names. Place names have a special power for us. Some come from our creation stories. Others refer to our traditional way of life and where specific plants and animals might be found in abundance. Perhaps more important, place names are often among the oldest words in our language. Linguists have found that place names often incorporate words or particles from Proto-Salish or now extinct Salish dialects that existed thousands of years ago. For us, place names are words that come from our beginnings. So it seems appropriate to start at the beginning with place names as we discuss open space in Missoula County. Here are a few. The Salish name for this area, specifically the confluence of Rattlesnake Creek and the Clark Fork River, is Nhla'ai, a name that later came to be used by Salish and Pend Oreille people to refer to the city of Missoula. It translates as place of small bull trout. The name for the confluence of the Blackfoot and Clark Fork River is Nyaitstum, or place of bull trout. The name for Miller Creek translates as has virgin's bower, and the mouth of Miller Creek is place where the eggs hatch. Fort Missoula is place of the killers. Lolo is called Tumsimhli, or no salmon. The Bitterroot River, Red Osier Dogwood Waters. How long have Salish people been calling the Bitterroot River Red Osier Dogwood Waters? How old is the place name for Council Groves, where the sovereign nations of Salish, Pend Oreille, and Kootenai people signed a treaty with the United States government in 1855? 500, 1,000, 10,000 years? How many generations of our ancestors called the Mill Creek area Has Currents, or called place of cottonwoods to refer to Grass Valley, or Two Waters for the place where Laval and Butler Creeks flow close to each other? How many generations knew Good Singing Place? Maybe from the beginning of time. The place names, however, describe a valley, a rich landscape that has been known and loved for hundreds of generations. They describe a place that for us, the Salish and Pend Oreille people, is filled with cultural meaning. For us, protecting the place that remains undeveloped, these places, keeping them open space, places where one can find moments of quiet solitude and rest in the beauty of the natural world, is essential. It's also essential for the valley's fish and wildlife. It's essential for the native plant communities that call this place home. They've been here from the beginning of time, but they have no voice to advocate for their own protection. We know the natural world has its limits. I have my limits, you have your limits. We all have our limits. We know that if we do not protect these places, we all, humans, native plants, and animals, will be diminished. We know this place will lose its vibrancy, what makes it special. We can imagine places for overdeveloped landscapes. We can imagine place names for them as well. For places without vibrant fish and wildlife populations, for communities where it's hard to find a quiet place to reconnect with the natural world. But none of us want to imagine any of those place names for the Missoula Valley. Please put the open space bond on the ballot. Please vote for the Missoula County Open Space Bond. Thank you. And the Salish Pend Oreille Culture Committee produced a place name map of the Missoula area. I'd like to give it to you as a gift. May I approach, please?
Yeah. Please just give it to Sarah here. Thank you. Lovely. Thank you, Ms. White. Amber.
Good morning. That's a hard one to follow, I have to say. Good morning, Commissioners, and thank you for hearing us. I'm Amber Sherrill, and I'm the Executive Director of Five Valleys Land Trust. I'm here representing the citizens of Open Space, Rivers, and Trails Working Group. We're a diverse coalition of nonprofit organizations and private citizens that have come together with the goal of continuing a long and successful history of conservation in Missoula County. In 2006, the citizens of our county passed a $10 million open space bond. This money was leveraged almost 4-to-1 by federal, state, and private sources, resulting in a huge amount of additional money for our county. These funds are nearly gone. The 2006 bond provided the funding needed to complete 43 new projects that protected 15,000 acres of wildlife habitat, over 9,000 acres of agricultural land, over 40 miles of waterways, and created 19 miles of new trails. This bond provided the critical matching funds needed to secure Travelers Rest State Park for the town of Lolo, providing a community space as well as a safe trail connection for the kids of Lolo to ride and walk to school. The Rock Creek project protected the confluence of Rock Creek and the Clark Fork River. This property alone has provided a hands-on opportunity for Missoula College Heavy Equipment Program, an outdoor classroom for Clinton school students, a bird banding station, ecology program, and now an All Abilities Trail that will soon connect to a wildlife viewing platform. The bond protected over 4,000 acres of the county's most productive agricultural soils, from Woodworth Meadow to Frenchtown and from Evero to Lolo. This gave beginning farmers and ranchers a place to farm and helped existing families continue their ranching operations and pass their land on to the next generation. In the other projects that utilize this fund, there were many more examples of critical wildlife habitat, important agricultural lands, important cultural sites, and community-changing projects that were funded over the past 12 years. We live in an area that is growing quickly and making many best-of lists nationally. Outdoor recreation and scenic open spaces have become an economic driver for both tourism and as well as individuals and companies relocating here from urban centers. This makes it particularly important right now that we plan for the future to both maintain, protect, and manage this piece of our growing economy. A new 2018 open space bond could finally provide Frenchtown residents access to the Clark Fork River from town, a project that would include an All Abilities access trail to the river, and the Frenchtown School, a natural area close by for education and fitness. In Seeley Lake, it could be used to provide a trail connection to the lake directly from town, creating the first ever opportunity for residents to get to the lake on foot. A new bond could also help complete the conservation of Mount Dean Stone, a project that has broad community support and a working group of over 20 diverse organizations ranging from Run Wild Missoula to Providence Health and Services to Summit Independent Living. This is not only an important connection for wildlife, but would secure a critical wildfire urban interface buffer zone as well as nearby recreation for the underserved Miller Creek area. These are only a few of the many projects that could be completed with available additional funding. Our ability to connect people with the outdoors not only improves their quality of life, but has been shown to improve their long-term health as well. An open space bond in 2018 would allow our community to continue this work by connecting underserved neighborhoods to natural areas and giving them access to safe trail connections within their communities. As the population of Western Montana continues to grow, planning for the future is critical for our ability to maintain our county's agricultural communities and keep our cities and towns livable. An open space bond will give us one of the tools to do this. The beauty of this type of public funding mechanism is that it allows us to respond to community needs for both recreation and access while also preserving wildlife habitat, restoring and protecting waterways, providing a way for agricultural livelihoods to continue and to protect our cultural sites and lands before they are lost. This is not about solving a problem for today or tomorrow, but for all the generations that come after us. Our coalition, along with 42 businesses and over 350 signatures, are asking you to give the citizens of Missoula County the opportunity to show their support for this work by placing a $15 million open space bond on the ballot for their consideration this November. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Sherrill.
Good morning, County Commissioners. My name is Andrea Davis, and I'm the Executive Director of Homeward. For those in the audience that, excuse me, don't know of our organization, we are a nonprofit 501c3 that develops homes in a sustainable way around the state of Montana, and our headquarters are here in Missoula, where we have a homeownership center, and we provide financial literacy education and one-on-one financial counseling and homebuyer education and counseling as well as renter education. And I'm here to speak specifically to the interface and the conversation around preservation of open space and housing affordability. Everybody in the audience and those that might be listening know that not only in our area here in Western Montana, but all of the great state of Montana and our country is having a housing affordability crisis in some areas. And it's natural to turn to land use, and some have made the assumption that preservation of open space is a cause of our housing affordability issues. And I guess I'm here to speak against that notion and to say that this is not an either-or conversation. You know, in my opinion, a strong, vibrant economy and community is made up of homes that we can afford, good paying jobs, and high quality of life. And all three of those things have to be nourished along. We need to pay attention to public policy of how those things are addressed. They don't necessarily happen by themselves. In some cases, sometimes we have to grow these things, and we have to pay attention. And in a market like Missoula and a market like Western Montana, where there is limited developable land in terms of existing infrastructure and things of that nature, we can have a challenge with finding places that are affordable to build. And so with that, I am highly encouraged that the county is undertaking an update to the land use map, especially that's surrounding the metropolis of Missoula, so we can address our land use issues, I think, in a very planned and concerted way along with the city of Missoula. I'm very encouraged that the city of Missoula is undertaking a housing policy. I sit on that steering committee, as does Commissioner Rowley, and we are looking forward to having something in place by the end of this calendar year. And my point to that is that we are all speaking of the need for land use, that we make wise decisions and investment in infrastructure that allows us to put development where development makes sense, where it's easy for us to access things like grocery stores and medical, services and jobs, and trails and open space. We are in a place that is going to continue to gain popularity, and folks are very interested in moving to all of Montana, let alone Western Montana. And we have to lean into this thoughtfully about how we're going to maintain what we all find to be one of the best parts of living here, which is access to open space and trails and a home that we can afford. Representing those that might be living with more modest wages, I can say that we develop in places that leverage existing infrastructure, and or we help actually extend trail systems where we can. And immediately I see the benefit to the residents that we serve, but also the neighborhood in which we build, because these folks may not have the ability to cruise up to Glacier Park for a weekend or such, but they have the ability to get out from their door and access the Clark Fork River, or, potentially walking all the way up to the North Hills, just because we have as a community, made that a priority for everybody, not just those that can afford it, but everybody, because open space is free to us. I understand that it impacts us as taxpayers. I myself is a homeowner here in Missoula, And I understand what that will do to my tax bill, but when I think about my daily expenditure of what this is in reality, it is worth every cent, every nickel. And so I am just really appreciative of the fact that this conversation is bringing about the concept and issue of housing affordability. I hope we continue to have that conversation so we can make some intentional policy decisions together. And I would highly encourage you to vote to place this open space bond on the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Oh, and I think we're going to finish some presentations by the coalition, and then we'll take general public comment. So sorry if there's any confusion there. Ms. Knudsen.
Good morning, Commissioners. I am Karen Knudsen, Executive Director of the Clark Fork Coalition. And on behalf of my organization, I would like to offer enthusiastic support for the proposed open space bond and stewardship levy. In the Coalition's 33 years of restoring and protecting the hardworking rivers of the Clark Fork Basin, we've noticed a few quirks about humans. As a species, we are drawn to water. Probably not a big surprise, given the fact that water is the basis of all life. However, we are also quick to assume rights to use it and relatively slow to recognize our obligation to preserve, protect, and steward it. Fortunately, Missoula has been really closing that gap. Thanks to engaged citizens and to proactive, responsive county leadership, we got on the stick decades ago, investing in infrastructure, in policies, and in a water ethic. And those efforts have really been paying dividends for clean water and healthy rivers ever since. The 2006 Open Space Bond is one of those efforts. It's an expression of the county's commitment to our irreplaceable waterways. As you heard from Amber, it's really gone to work in good ways for our water resources, having preserved over 40 miles of river corridors, 1,000+ acres of wetlands, and repairing corridors on 13 tributaries. Now, not only are these water resources the biological supermarket of our corner of the planet, they're also our community's heartbeat, and they're wild, wonderful, and accessible to all. And although the 2006 Open Space Bond is nearly spent down, the work is not yet done. Our fast-growing county, and river-loving county, I might add, is moving fast, and we need to ensure that development and the accompanying recreation is not too hard on our already well-loved rivers, like the Clark Fork, the Blackfoot, and the Bitterroot. We also have other aquatic anchors in our open space system to protect, some of which maybe we've taken for granted, but still serve as de facto natural spaces, open spaces. I'm thinking of many of the creeks and streams that Jermaine mentioned: Mill Creek, Miller Creek, Deep Creek, Laval Creek, Butler Creek, O'Brien. There's many, many other streams in need of protection. There are also many aquifer recharge areas that we need to protect to make sure that they are not lost forever. The simple fact of the matter is no one is making more of this stuff. No one is making more nature, more open spaces, more wild rivers, more quiet creeks and streams. It's up to us to preserve and steward the wild nature that we've been gifted to care for, and to reaffirm the county's commitment to protecting special places. I would argue that putting the open space bond and mill levy on the ballot this fall is an excellent place to start. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Knudsen. Amber, how many more coalition presentations do we have before opening it up for general public comment? One. I'm sorry. Seven. Come on up.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Adrene Marks. I am here to represent the rural areas, and I think most of us in this room know well what our rural areas are. I see many of the people in Missoula flock there. We all have the visions of those secret, soulful filled places along streams. the vistas that we seek. That's rural Missoula County. But I'm here today to talk about a specific area that needs to be addressed, and that is business. Having been involved in rural residential construction, as well as owning Rovero's downtown City Lake, I have been involved in business in rural Missoula County for over 30 years. The business perspective is extremely important. Extremely important because it reflects the well-being of your communities. It is the vibrancy of the people that live there. And then in the case of our specific rural areas, Missoula County has the almost fantasy-like lifestyle that fill people with awe as they pass through our valleys. I see it every day in my business. I've heard about it. They return. That's what you have in rural Missoula County. Sustainable business, however, is a consideration that must be given to the financial benefits of living in this place we call Missoula County, to protect and give access to those special places, to provide trails, the resource protection, clear water, wonderful air. That is what sets Missoula County apart, and that is what business in rural county, Missoula County, really thrives on, and we must address it. We have a 4-season rural business foundation out there, and business understands well what the bond does for us. We see daily the demands and the opportunities grow exponentially. Not just yearly, but every single turn in every single season. That demand on those open spaces increases. And that is the foundation of our rural community. It is the foundation because it's the residents, it's the city residents that travel up, it's the people that live there in the harvest industry for timber and whatnot. We need those open spaces, we need access, and we need resource protection. The benefit of the open space bond has a history of enabling our unique place in this world to better exist, not only for business, not at all. It exists for our residents, it exists for our tourists, and it needs to exist for those babies even being born in our hospitals today. And those babies, this is eternal. This is what Missoula County needs to grasp and hold on to. It's unique, it's valued across the nation. Those babies will be our future customers. They will be our future owners. But it is today that we have the opportunity to protect that place in which our businesses thrive, that place in which residents want to have a house, that place where I have seen tourists and visitors return to Missoula County to feel the grounding and the spirit of those open spaces. And that's what the open space bond does for us. Your constituents have been polled, and they are in major support of this bond. I'm here to say that that also is reflected in business. Business depends on healthy open places in Missoula County. Business depends on healthy citizens, and that's what open space does. It is for rural community well-being. It is for our future, all of Missoula County. It's to be provided in the future for the nation. Your support of this is just plain good business. And it is a solid investment for our future. And I appreciate the opportunity to let you know that all of Missoula County is somewhat the same. The city and the county thrive on open spaces, and business is part of that, and business is what makes us work in that other world that exists before we flee to those open spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Marks. I'm sorry. Okay. Thank you very much. We will go ahead and open it up to general public comment, pro or con. Now is your opportunity. Come on up to the microphone. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Dodie Anderson. I represent here today Transition Missoula, which it works for a just transition to a resilient and sustainable community as well as regenerative. We are a nonprofit under the 501c3 of the Jeanette Rankin Peace Center. And I'm here to speak in favor of putting the bond on the ballot. I want to approach my comments in favor of it a little different. I'd like to tell you the tale of two cities. One of the cities was a county seat, and still is, and it was in an area surrounded by community farms and open space. And there was no plan for what to do with it. Developers came in and wanted to see development, and so the areas around the town lost the bean fields and the groves and became an area of gated communities, strip malls, clinics, industrial parks, and the downtown area of that town became deserted. There was monoliths to big banks, monoliths to big developments downtown. But then as time went on, the homes that were near to those areas became less desirable. The people that lived in them became, less desirable in many ways because they were the ones that brought in the crime. So downtown, after the hours of business, became a ghost town. And down the line, that city actually had to apply for federal help to fight the crime. Right next to that city in the same county, there was a wise realtor that decided that those homes, those neighborhoods, needed to be revitalized. So if the home couldn't sell, he hired local artisans, local contractors, local builders to fix it up. He regenerated the community. The downtown was still a vibrant area. There was not building way outside of town where everybody retreated to at the end of the workday, but there was community. The downtown area held festivals. The college in the town was a safe place for the college kids to be able to walk the streets at night. And it was a town that was sought after. So that is a choice between unfettered development and regenerative development within a community. The other tale of two cities I'd like to tell you about quickly has to do with the fire protection. Just recently, you heard about the Holiday Fire, and the one on the other side of that open area was the Thomas Fire and how it raged through developed areas that were some very wealthy homes with space around them, some close together built homes, and how they just were gone in an instant. Even their foundations of concrete and steel were destroyed by the heat of that fire. On the town right next to it, there was sustainable farming. There was groves. There was irrigated land, and the fire didn't get to the town. So we have those two issues here. We can watch our town develop unfettered growth and become a ghost town downtown. And we can watch us become more and more susceptible to fire damage without sustainable, intelligent, irrigated farming around our town. And so I strongly urge you to put this bond on the ballot. It will help all of our property values retain their value and also protect us in a way that we may not have thought of. And I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson.
County Commissioners, thank you for your attention. My name is Lee Tang et al. I'm from Tura, and I'm here to speak against putting the open space bond on the ballot. With $1 here and a few dollars there, my property taxes have gone up 18% in the last 2 years. and I will be paying for the 2006 open space bond for the next 8 years. A large part of that recent increase was due to the Fort Missoula Park bond, which was also put forward by the city of Missoula. That's the bond that voters in the Clinton, Bonner, Lolo, Frenchtown, Swan Valley, Seeley Lake, Potomac, and even Target Range precincts voted against, but were outvoted by the urban area of Missoula. And Missoula did well. They got their park and they got $1 million for every little park in town. The money for the trails has never been spent because the people in the rest of the county never wanted that money in the first place, and it will end up in the Missoula urban area as well. So the rural areas didn't want that bond. They didn't get anything from it except the bill. This was a case of taxation without representation. It's up to you, the county commissioners, to represent the whole county. You say that we're just putting it on the ballot to be voted on by the people. Well, as we have seen, if you put it on the ballot, we will be at the mercy of the Missoula urban area, which seems to have an insatiable appetite for spending money. The open space proposal is another proposal created by Missoula. The Missoula Valley, as Ms. White of the Salish Kootenai tribe said. I'm sure it's a very good plan for Missoula, but in the rest of the county, we already have a great deal of open space. It's mostly open space. We are certainly not interested in buying more playgrounds for Missoula. We would like to be left out of this bond. I ask you to not vote for this bond, or better yet, just form a special taxation district and let the Missoula urban area have their own bond. Dana Cosby of the Missoula Elections Office told me that an election for a special taxation district would be easy to set up. So I ask that as an alternate approach. Give the people of the Missoula urban area their bond. Looking inside the open space proposal, conservation easements do a lot of good for Missoula County. I support conservation easements. I happen to own one. But I don't think they should be supported by bond money. First of all, they're private property. I don't think you should use public tax money for property that the public does not have access to. Secondly, the purpose of the bond is to force people who don't want the bond or who can't afford the bond to pay for it. Now, that may be acceptable for funding schools or roads or fire protection, but I don't find it acceptable for something that the county could very well do without if it had to. But it doesn't have to. Conservation easements will still happen. Five Valleys Land Trust has over 100 conservation easements in Missoula County. 3/4 of those were funded without any tax money. The conservation easements that Five Valleys put into the 2006 open space bond, only 18% of that money was tax money. The rest of the money came from other sources. Clearly, there are plenty of other sources to fund conservation easements. They will still happen. Don't put the property owners under the hammer for more taxes. The people who want these conservation easements should raise the money for these. It should be voluntary contributions that fund conservation easements.
And you're at about 4.5 minutes, sir.
I live in the Clinton School District. We will be putting a bond on the November ballot, which will raise our taxes $166 for a $200,000 house. We don't need more taxes. I support the Clinton school bond because it needs to be done. I have no support for an open space bond. Thank you. I'm sorry I went over.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Denny Iverson. I ranch up in Potomac. I just wanted to talk to you about the benefits of the bond to the agricultural community out in the county. We have a rich and still alive large agricultural community out in the county. you know, we farmers and ranchers don't spend our money on ourselves. We bring it to town. We bring it to Missoula. We spend it on goods and services downtown, out West Broadway, out South Brooks. We don't go to the south of France when we have a good year. We buy some new stuff that we need. And so keeping a good agricultural community around this county, out the different valleys, is important to the city of Missoula. As your previous speaker talked about, conservation easements are a good thing, and I disagree with him in that I think if the folks in Missoula County and the city of Missoula want to see our farms and ranches maintained as open space, then they need to pony up for it. We can get a lot more money selling it for subdivision, but that doesn't do the future generations any good. If my grandkids want a ranch down the road, there's going to need to be land available for them. And they may not be able to own it, but they might be able to lease it from the family that does own it. And maybe it's that city kid that lives here in Missoula on a city block that drives up to Cedar Lake on the weekends and looks at those farms and ranches and goes, gosh, wouldn't it be fun to work on one of those places, or maybe run one or own one day. And, the open space bond provides an opportunity for those lands to stay available for that young person that has aspirations of doing that one day. I think Lan Lindbergh, if he could have been here, he got ill on the way down, but he would have brought up the fact that this is a good opportunity for the citizens of Missoula County to participate in conservation if they so choose. I'm a strong opponent to forced protection of farms and ranches. But I'm a strong proponent of voluntary conservation, and this is a good way to be able to make that happen for folks that want to pass it down to the next generation and still be able to, have some money for retirement or something by using a conservation easement. And so I urge you to put it on the ballot. Let the voters decide. The last one had strong support out in the county, and I think this one will too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Iverson.
Thank you.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Good morning, Commissioners. My name's Chris Clasby, and I thank you for the opportunity to voice my support of this open space initiative. I am a recreationalist. I've been involved in a lot of conservation activities and have worked with several land management agencies. And I can say that I've never worked with one that's been so cooperative as Five Valleys Land Trust in keeping an open mind toward inclusive access and opportunities for recreation. I think this open space bond initiative will provide an opportunity for not only all of us in this room, but our children and including people with disabilities. And so to be able to recreate and take advantage of the outdoor opportunities we have, we need a place to do it in. And so you look at the examples of Five Valley Land Trust is working on right now, for example, the Rock Creek project at the confluence, the Dean Stone project, and they have kept people with disabilities as well as just the broader general public in mind every step along the way. And whether I've worked with federal or state or private management agencies, I've never had such cooperative, open-minded people. And I think we'll continue to see that, and we will all benefit from the public open space that will be available to us through this initiative. So again, would ask you to please support this initiative, and I just wanted to voice my opinion of support. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Susan Kohler, and I am the CEO of Missoula Aging Services. We promote the independence, dignity, and health of older adults and those that care for them. I wanted to thank the Board of County Commissioners for giving me the opportunity to provide comment on the request to place a question on the November 6, 2018 ballot on whether or not to authorize the board to sell and issue up to $15 million in general obligation bonds from Missoula County for the purpose of expanding efforts for open space. I will say personally, I'm an outdoor enthusiast, so I understand the request for this. But however, I am not here to weigh in on the pros or cons of open space. Since property taxes are the primary source of funding for important services and quality of life, I hope you will join me in representing those with limited and fixed incomes who may not be present today or able to engage in the process of making these decisions. They count on you and people like myself to represent them when they can't or don't understand. This includes our children, our older adults, people with disabilities, people with mental, intellectual, and physical disabilities, living on fixed incomes and limited incomes. Our property taxes have become a burden for these individuals who are trying to find affordable housing, food, and clothing. I am concerned about my perception that our community prioritizes issues like affordable housing, health care for all, elimination of homelessness, the prevention of suicide, but then through a bond asks taxpayers to vote on things unrelated to these priorities. This perception is backed by a recent survey completed by a research team from the University of Montana's Social Science Research Laboratory, requested by the city of Missoula. This survey examined perceptions of citizen satisfaction with municipal services defined in a broader context. The number one concern, or 23.5% of persons surveyed, said it was that housing was their number one issue of concern. This was followed by taxes being too high. I would also like to point out that the state of Montana made devastating cuts to mental health, disability, Medicaid, and aging services this biennium. We now need to look at how we care for our most vulnerable community members when our state legislators don't. I'm asking that you and other local officials join with other county and city officials across the state to find a way to generate additional revenue other than through property taxes, which affect all property owners and their renters. I would also ask that you prioritize requests for ballot bonds until we are able to find new revenue sources that don't continue to burden many of the people who have owned their homes for a very long time but have no additional revenue to pay the rising costs of property taxes. I have worked at Missoula Aging Services for 35 years, and I'm fastly approaching one of those fixed income individuals who owns their own home. And I've seen firsthand the struggle of older adults trying to stay in their own homes with taxes rising, the cost of supportive services, the cost of renting, and the impact of social isolation on a person's health and well-being. Please consider these people when deciding on whether to place new bonds on the ballot. If you don't, who will? Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Ms. Kohler.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Jim Brown, representing Five Valleys Audubon Society. We support putting the bond on the ballot this fall, and for an important reason, and it is that the wetlands, riparian areas, and the grasslands of our county's valleys are so critical for wildlife. That's where the diversity of wildlife exists. For example, some 80% of bird species utilize wetlands and riparian areas at some point in their life. But a key problem here is that these lands are fairly limited in our valleys of western Montana. When I moved here 10 or 50 years or so ago, I was overcome with the beauty here and being able to work and live in a place with this open space and wildlife at your back door. I mentioned this to a friend that lived here for some time, and he says, yeah, but you should have seen it 10 years ago. There's been so much change. And that I think we all realize the pace of change has been fantastic and it's going to continue. So when you consider this limited resource, and the population growth that we expect and is going to happen, time is running short to do something about this. So I think it's really important that we give the citizens of the county a chance to save some of these important open space values. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to comment. My name is Hannah Nickenow. I represent the Montana chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, and I speak in favor of the open space bond to be on the ballot this fall. Hunters and anglers have some incredible access to hunting and fishing opportunities right out our back door, thanks to past open space bonds. That being said, our community is growing and other access sites are being pressured. We need to make some movement to continue to protect those places as our community grows responsibly. Personally, I'm also in the process of becoming a first-time homebuyer. I'm extremely excited to be purchasing a home on the south side of Missoula. Particularly, my excitement stems from some of the open space opportunities and the conservation of those places that will come with a new open space bond. Thank you very much for hearing my personal support of the open space bond as well as that of Montana Backcountry Hunters and Anglers.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Pat Sweeney. I live in the 9 Mile Valley. I'm a retired Forest Service wildlife biologist. Much of my last job was working on wildlife connectivity in western Montana. I'm also the chairman of the 9 Mile Wildlife Work Group, an organization whose vision is to promote connected landscapes and connected communities. The 9 Mile Valley is designated as a demographic connectivity area by the Forest Service in the Northern Continental Divide Ecosystems Amendments to Forest Plans for Grizzly Bear Habitat Management. I kind of apologize for that sentence, but it's a long document. That's the title. This means that the area can act as sort of a stepping stone for grizzly bears so that they can move from the Northern Continental Divide ecosystem to the Cabinet Yaak and Bitterroot ecosystems. This DCA, Demographic Connectivity Area, was created here in part because much of the land is already protected from development. Connectivity areas may benefit not only grizzly bears, but a host of other wildlife species, including deer and elk, which are quite abundant here, and a source of recreation and sustenance for many Missoula County residents. The 9 Mile area is mostly managed by the Forest Service, but much of the valley bottom is private land, of which a large percentage is protected by conservation easements. These protected lands ensure habitat for everything from hummingbirds to grizzly bears to cutthroat trout. One example of protected private land includes the 1,000-acre-plus Checkpoint Ranch in the 6 Mile Valley. In 2011, the county commissioners used funding from the Open Lands Bond to help secure a conservation easement to protect the ranch's rural character. The Checkpoint Ranch today is a working cattle ranch that not only provides a family's livelihood, but also some of the best wildlife habitat in the 9 Mile area. Its large ponds, healthy riparian areas, and well-managed forests and grasslands support a huge variety of wildlife. The 9 Mile Wildlife Group, the 9 Mile Wildlife Work Group has done spring bird watching trips here for past 7 years and has noted over 80 species of birds on the ranch. Local folks know that if they drive and park along the 9 Mile Road by the ranch, that they have an excellent chance to observe the elk that live there. The Checkpoint Ranch is one example of many areas in Missoula County that have benefited from past open space investments that not only aids wildlife, but increases the quality of life for human residents and visitors as well. Open space and connectivity is hardly a memory in many parts of America. Habitat connectivity is important because wildlife populations limited to habitat islands are at increased risk of extinction of local extirpation. Increasing human populations and development have taken its toll and will continue to threaten what is left of our wildlife legacy. We are fortunate in Missoula County to have essentially all the wildlife species that were present when Lewis and Clark came through here over 200 years ago. How cool is that? I've focused on how open lands help wildlife by conserving habitat and reducing fragmentation. But just as importantly, open lands improve our quality of life and make Missoula County a desirable place to live and work. Many of us use the trails and enjoy the access, the wildlife, and the vistas made possible through past open land bonds. Lands protected through these funds make Missoula County a better place to live for all members of the socioeconomic spectrum, from the very poor to the very rich. Most anyone can enjoy these lands with little or no additional investment other than a very modest temporary increase in landowner taxes. In order to help conserve our wildlife legacy and quality of life, I respectfully ask that the county commissioners place an open space bond initiative on the November 2018 ballot. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney.
I made a copy of this. Would you?
If you give them to Sarah here. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. Sarah, Kaylee, County Attorney. Ron Slater, SCH-LADER. And I am only here representing myself as a Missoula County taxpayer.
I'm glad you clarified Missoula County, not
Well,
Mineral
I could
County.
Texas is Mineral County
Okay.
too, but anyway, I'm here today as Missoula County. I attended the county or the city council meeting a couple weeks ago when they discussed this issue, and what I got out of that meeting is that I live in unaffordable housing, and that my tax bill will be going up more than the $35 figure a year that they were throwing around. But I don't mind paying taxes if I can see where my money's going. I like seeing the county sheriff's car drive by my house occasionally. I like seeing the Mineral County sanding truck plow the snow off my road in the wintertime getting up to my house. And I love looking out my front living room window at a huge chunk of open space land that will never see a house because of a conservation easement purchase under the current open space bond. Therefore, I would like to go on record as supporting the county commissioners to pass a resolution to put this issue on the fall ballot, November ballot. I would like to see the county commissioners continue to protect the agricultural land and let Missoula enjoy their affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Slater.
Good morning. County Commissioners, it's great to see you. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today. I'm a fifth-generation Montanan, third-generation Missoulian, husband, father, and president and CEO of the fastest-growing sports organization in this country, and that's Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. It's my pleasure to speak to you today. My name's Land Tawney, Tawney. So hopefully you guys had a great Independence Day, celebrated our independence, that we broke away from the tyranny across the pond. I myself celebrated on public lands with two other families. It was amazing. It took us some gas to get there and a little bit of food, but we had 5 days of being outside, away from all the technology, and really around this river. Now, we weren't the only people there. There were some folks that were a little farther downriver that had $200,000, trailers. Camping trailers, and there's those that had like tents like us that could have cost under $100. But the thing that really I think I love about public lands is that everybody was on the same playing field. It didn't matter if you were a banker, it didn't matter if you were a plumber, it didn't matter if you were a teacher. Everybody was on the same playing field, and to me, that's really what our American public lands are about. And while we celebrated with some apple pie this weekend, I don't think we did eat hot dogs. But I don't think there's anything more American than our public lands, right? And again, it's because it's open to everybody, and everybody has a say on kind of how those are managed as well. talking a lot about access and access around kind of Missoula, the city, but also in the county. And I think, one place in particular to talk about access is really the Rock Creek confluence. And it hasn't been mentioned yet, but that's the confluence of my favorite place to fish, which is Rock Creek, along with the Clark Fork River. Before that was purchased, I could not go in there, and it was also slated for a big development. And so now, forever, I can go in there and fish at the confluence of some of the most storied rivers in Missoula, and not just me, but anybody that can actually get there. You look at Dean Stone Mountain, and I think the opportunity for folks to go up there. Chris talked about the opportunities for disabled folks. These are, again, public lands are open to everybody that actually wants to get out there. For me, besides the opportunities to hunt and fish and the outdoor economy that goes with that, in Montana, it's about $6 billion, $6 billion with a B. That's sustainable, and it's also something that we can grow if we take care of what we have. So there's that piece. There's the clean air. There's the clean water. Try to put a price tag on that. And then I think the last piece of what I started with is the solace, right? That opportunity to really get away. And I think in this day and age, we do not have many opportunities to be able to do that and kind of reset. And I know as I sat and did some early morning hikes without the family and had some time to talk, made a little mosaic on this beach with my son, those are the times that kind of reset me. And I think they reset everybody in this room. And so when you think about putting this on the ballot, think about your last Independence Day, what that meant to get away from that tyranny, and what it means to take this to the people, right? Let them decide if they want this or not. It's up to them. And I appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk today, wholeheartedly support this as an individual and also from Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, and hope you do too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tawney. Mr. Kier.
Good day, Commissioners. My name is Grant Kier, K-I-E-R. I'm a resident of the city and county and a stay-at-home dad. Prior to that career path, I was serving as the executive director at Five Valleys Land Trust, and I would like to take a second to speak not about all of the inspiring components of open space, which I think we've heard a lot about today, but some of the nuts and bolts, and I think it's important to understand some of the mechanics of this process too, to understand the value of this open space bond. I want to just acknowledge my respect for Mr. Tangadal's comments, and in my recent efforts talking to a lot of voters across this county and Montana, I very much appreciate how much taxation is on people's minds. It's on my mind too. And it was on our mind at Five Valleys Land Trust. And we took every dollar of taxpayers' money that we asked to spend very seriously. We thought really hard about every project we brought forward as an organization to make sure that we brought the best value for the taxpayer possible, and that every project was the best quality possible to bring forward to taxpayers. I'd also like to add, and Mr. Tengadal talked about this, that there's other money out there too. It's true that there's other money out there too. We took a lot of pride in raising private capital, in reaching out to federal and other funding sources. But the truth is, all of those funding sources depend on something local as seed money. And whether we go to foundations or private philanthropists or to the federal tax coffers to try to get funding to support these projects, what people want to see is that the local community has skin in the game, it is invested, and more often than not, it is a requirement of those other funding sources that there is a local source of funding as seed funding to bring these projects forward. So I want to make sure it's really clear that without a local open space bond, we won't have access to so much of that capital that we've been able to leverage more than 5 to 1 in order to do these great projects across Missoula County. I'd also like to add that unlike other bonds, these are not being issued at one time. We are not asking the county to go forward and issue $15 million of bonds the day this passes. These, like other funds, will only be issued once great projects have been brought forward and vetted by the community. And hopefully we will do that patiently and with a lot of cooperation between the city and the county as we've done in the past. And part of that strategy is knowing that we have the money there so that we can encourage landowners to be confident in bringing forward projects, but we can time those that make sense with the tax burdens of the county and the city and the funding sources available from other leveraging sources. So I just want to make clear that this is a really unique program. It has the potential to be an incredible source of leverage. And in addition to bringing forward the opportunity for voters to tax themselves, even after those bonds the enabling statute is passed to enable the bonds to be sold, there's a lot of latitude for the city and the county and the cooperating entity to work together on the timing of that to make sure it makes sense for all of the entities involved and the taxpayers as well. So sorry to belabor the nuts and bolts, but I think it's really important to understand those and what a tremendous and unique opportunity this is. As a citizen and one who is sensitive to taxes right now, I still do think this is the right thing for this community to do to make sure that as a stay-at-home dad, that I one day can be a stay-at-home grandfather and show my grandchildren the same places that I'm now taking my daughter to enjoy outside. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kier.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for allowing me to speak today, and I'll be brief. My name is Tony Banovich. I'm the Executive Director of Run Wild Missoula and the Race Director for the Missoula Marathon. Run Wild Missoula is a 501c3 nonprofit with over 1,500 members. We regularly use the open space lands in and around Missoula. In fact, this morning I myself was out running along the Milwaukee Trail in the Kim Williams area. On an almost 24/7 basis, we're running, walking, hiking, and biking on the Milwaukee Trail, Bitterroot Trail, the Lower Rattlesnake, Greeno Park, North Hills, Mount Jumbo, Mount Sentinel, and more. We understand that there's many needs in the community, whether that be affordable housing, public safety, or education. However, our mission at Run Wild Missoula is to promote and support running and walking for people of all ages and abilities. After reviewing the proposed bond, the Run Wild Missoula Board of Directors agrees that the creation of new open spaces and new trails will improve the running and walking opportunities for our members and the community as a whole. By placing this bond on the ballot, our members and our community will be one step closer to having a greater ability to be fit, active, and live a healthy lifestyle regardless of financial means. Because of this, we would respectfully request that the $15 million general obligation open space bond be placed on the ballot for the 2018 general election for consideration by the Missoula County voters.
Thank you, Mr. Banovich.
I'm Jean Zozel. I'm Executive Director of Garden City Harvest. And I have a story to share with you that's not your typical open space story. It's about preserving a 3.5-acre farm in the heart of this city. Garden City Harvest is a farming and gardening nonprofit that was formed in 1996 to fight food insecurity in our community. Today, we manage 20 sites throughout Missoula, urban farms, community gardens, and school gardens. We grow almost 200,000 pounds of produce each year, making it accessible to everyone regardless of income and other barriers. Our work impacts roughly 20,000 people annually, and we own only one piece of property, a 3.5-acre farm on River Road. That farm is surrounded by a dense, underserved urban neighborhood consisting of predominantly low to moderate income households and mixed-use development. It's not what I think of when I usually think of open space. But the farm soil is classified as Grantsdale loam, which is considered prime farmland. And on that site, we're able to sustainably grow more than 35,000 pounds of produce a year. We rent 55 community garden plots to families to grow their own food. We donate roughly 5,000 pounds of veggies from that site to the Pavarello for their soup kitchen each year. And we invite hundreds of people to volunteer in those farm fields and take veggies home in return. Historically, this area west of Russell Street was populated by truck farms. Today, the River Road Farm is only one of 2 community green spaces in that neighborhood. It's an example of agricultural land preservation that carries on the legacy of farming from generations past, thanks in part to a grant from the 2006 Open Space Fund. Roughly 3 acres of the farm are now protected with a conservation easement to ensure it will remain as such for generations to come. Around 1/3 of an acre was not suitable for farming and was used to build a permanent home for our organization with an educational hub for community-wide food-related activities and adequate office space for our 36 staff. The farm is a living outdoor classroom and demonstration of sustainability for people of all ages, including university students, for-profit farmers, volunteers, educators, seniors, and others. It promotes physical and emotional health and well-being, and it's critical to the neighborhood and is an important food source for our community. As a community green space that's actively used by hundreds of people each year, the safety of this neighborhood is enhanced by the upgrades that we've made at this site. Research has shown that urban green spaces increase a sense of community ownership and stewardship, and they increase eyes on the street. Studies have shown that crime decreases in neighborhoods as the amount of green space increases, and that vegetation has been known to reduce mental fatigue, one of the precursors to violent behavior. So with all of that said, I feel it's safe to say the open space funds granted to us in 2014 were a good investment in this community. Commissioners, I hope you'll place the open space bond measure on the November ballot and give community members a voice in this process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, commissioners and staff. My name is Brian von Lossberg. I currently represent Ward 1 on City Council and also serve as City Council President. Thank you very much for your public service and for the opportunity to comment in support of putting this question on the November ballot. I'm sure you've received the resolution in support of doing so from the council. I was an enthusiastic vote in support of doing that. And I wanted to mention a couple things. We had a letter from Rob Erickson, the chair of OSAC committee, and I really appreciated that letter in part for the history it provided over the last 40 years of our community's open space ethic and the value we place on that, going back to a $500,000 measure back in 1980 and then through the 1995 and 2006 open space bonds. And so when I look at this question, the most important beginning point for me is the question of does this represent our community values? And open space clearly is squarely in the center of these values that the community has. And I think it's important that we continue to have the tools to act on those values. I wanted to focus, I appreciate Mr. Keir's remarks about some of the nuts and bolts, and I wanted to touch on the specifics about the amounts because we're talking about this $15 million general obligation bond, as well as a levy that's been brought up, which obviously is something that the city would act on. But I think it's important to look at those together, and I certainly look at those as a pair, despite the fact that they would obviously be separate questions. Through this 40-year history with open space money, we've acquired a fantastic inventory and asset base, if you will, of lands and areas. And with that comes a responsibility to provide the proper stewardship for those areas. And I think through my 4.5 years on council, I've had to wrestle with that on an annual basis and seeing that this is really an area that we need to work more on. And so when we talk about the $15 million general obligation bond and the $4 million or roughly $500,000 city-focused levy for conservation land stewardship, again, I think of those as a pair, and I think of those as the responsible question to put to the voters. And that's really the thing I want to leave you all with is that there's been a lot of thoughtful debate and discussion around those relative amounts. The $15 million is perhaps not as high as some would want even for a question like this, but I think the combination of the two, $15 million and the $500,000 conservation stewardship levy does represent that thoughtful, responsible question to put to the voters. When we look at conservation stewardship issues, I'm reminded of walking around the Northside neighborhood where I live with my wife and daughter and hearing the sheep working on weed management up in the North Hills. I think about the thinning projects on Mount Jumbo. We've talked about the need to have skin in the game and match money available to do some of this work. These tools, the general obligation money and the levy, provide that skin in the game and the opportunity for us to leverage additional resources at multiples that are impressive and helpful. And we clearly have additional opportunities, restoration work along the Clark Fork River, access work along the river, and I'm selfishly focused on Ward 1, issues I hear about parking areas and trailhead work, for instance, up along Duncan Drive, along Waterworks. And those are just sort of some Ward 1 centric issues that get to that stewardship access. So again, thanks very much for considering this. I hope you'll support putting the question on the ballot. The city will be taking up its specific language relative to the city-focused levy resolution, but together I think they, again, represent a very responsible, thoughtful question to put to the voters, and I believe and trust in the voters. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Von Lossberg.
Good morning. My name is Jim Cusker. I'm a lifelong resident of Grass Valley. Grass Valley is the land that borders the Clark Fork River. To the east, it begins at the base of Council Hill, and it continues all the way past Hughson. This sliver of land was recognized immediately by the early settlers. When they came in, they were folks who were looking for land, and they chose the best land in the valley, in Grass Valley. Now, the first bond that was passed, and I want to give special thanks to Gene Curtis as a member of the commission at that time, who recognized the value to future generations for protecting the soil, the important agricultural land for the future. Now, during the past 10 years, there have been 6 projects in Grass Valley that have been funded in part by the Open Space Bond Funds. 6 projects covering 1,866 acres and drawing $1.15 million. Now, this protection, all provided by willing landowners who said, yep, I'll give up my development rights because I believe that agricultural land and the opportunity for agriculture in the future and the food security of our valley is absolutely essential. But those of us, many of us who live on the land, that's what we've got. That's our more valuable resource from the monetary point of view as well. And many folks who would love to protect their land in perpetuity are restricted in so doing because they give up their development rights. They should be compensated for that. And that's what the Open Space Bond does for those folks who want to protect this resource that once it's gone, it's gone. Now, you might hear those figures and say, well, I guess we've taken care of Grass Valley, that much acreage, that much money spent. We don't have to worry about them. Oh, not so. There's a lot more acreage out there. And once again, I want to provide a word of thanks to the commissioners and to CAPS for doing a little work ahead of time with the mapping project. And when I looked at the preliminary results that they gave, I found a great deal of encouragement as to what the folks in Missoula County, how they feel about land use. I noted that as far as Grass Valley itself is concerned, the consensus was this needs to be reserved as agricultural land. And there's a lot of it there. There's a lot of it there. But another thing.
Jim, you're pushing 4 minutes here.
Okay, good. But another thing I liked was also the fact that there are several hundred acres in the Clay Hills that was identified as a residential area. You could build a lot of affordable homes if you had that much land available. So I certainly urge you to support, pass a resolution supporting the bond, and I think we can have both. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cusker.
Commissioners, I'm Bert Lindler, a resident of Grant Creek. I'm here to thank the Commission and the City Council for their support of trail construction in Grant Creek. We now have 2.5 miles of paved trail that extends both through the city and the county, connecting our neighborhoods and allowing safe travel alongside a narrow road that often has high-speed traffic. So we're very grateful, and that trail could not have been built without the support of open space bond money that provided for design of the trail, that provided for reconstruction of fences that had to be destroyed so the trail could be built, and actually for the acquisition of some land to allow the trail to be built. Specifically, want to thank Commissioner Jane Curtis, who played a key role in that. And I encourage your support of putting the open space bond issue on the November ballot. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lindler.
Hi, I'm Ethel McDonald, property owner for 40 years of the same little house. And of course, I've seen my property taxes double, but I've seen everything else at least double. The price of a movie, a book, it's doubled. I am happy to pay taxes, and in addition to be a strong supporter of Five Valleys Land Trust and Homeward, as well as Run Wild Missoula and numerous bike organizations. My point today is to talk more about the affordable housing and taxation, but it'll take me a minute to get there. As a citizen and a supporter of Five Valleys Land Trust, my most memorable involvement was in getting the Cox property, which is the big connector between Mount Sentinel and Patty Canyon. And it's so used. And that property, the Cox property itself, which is the connection to Forest Service land now, thanks to our work, would have been developed. I mean, it's beautiful home sites. Anybody would love to live there. Which brings me to another of the, I think I forgot to say I was an open space advisory council city for, I think, 15 years. But one of my last really memorable projects there to work on as an open space member was talking to the Barmeyer family, and then going to the grand opening, and I know at least two of you, maybe all three, were there, of that trail, which I went on again last week and came back on the east side. And as I came down, I didn't realize all the beautiful houses in the forest on the other side. If it were not for people like the Barmeyers, or the Barmeyers particularly, that would be what their property could have become. And that is not accessible. And they're beautiful homes, I'm sure. From where I was, they look big and beautiful. And I hope they pay a good chunk of taxes. And I hope they support the open space bond, because they're living right in the middle of it. That, is always a question. But is that a place for affordable housing? No way. That is not the kind of land we need to save for affordable housing.
Ethel, you're about 4 minutes.
Oh, no kidding. Okay, I'll go
How
faster.
time flies, yes.
I thought I was going to be concise. The point is that is not a place for affordable housing. And the other place, as open space committee person, we tried really hard to work with Grass Valley. There's a lot of land there that should not be developed for housing. It's good agricultural land. And transportation-wise, it's not good to spread out. We need good affordable housing within the city structure. Sorry to go over.
Thank you, Ms. McDonald. And just as a reminder, we've got lots of folks queued up, and in this room, brevity is a virtue. So if you can hold your comments to around 3 minutes, that would be great. Thank you.
Good morning, County Commissioners. My name is Ben Haran. I'm the Executive Director of Mountain Bike Missoula, which is a stewardship and trails organization here in Missoula with membership in project areas that span from Sealy Lake to Lolo to the 9 Mile to Gold Creek, as well as in Missoula here itself. Every day we work hard to expand our mission and pursue our mission of connecting the communities of Missoula County with single track. I just want to take a moment briefly here to discuss trails as an economic benefit. This is something that obviously play into our quality of life and why many of us choose to live here, but it bears stating that trails are central to the outdoor recreation economy here in Montana, which is now well over $6 billion a year in consumer spending and supports 71,000 jobs in this state. This is something that in Missoula specifically we've seen grow dramatically through events like the Missoula Marathon and things like that, as well as bicycle racing events, the Missoula XC at Marshall Mountain, as well as open space areas like this that allowed Missoula to be selected by USA Cycling to host the 2017 and 18 Collegiate National Championships. That's something that would not be possible without open space projects like we've seen with our partners like Five Valleys Land Trust and the Nature Conservancy. In addition to events like this that bring many hundreds of people to town to spend money in restaurants and bars and hotels over 6 days, it also builds the opportunities for sort of diffuse recreation. People coming through to ride their bike because they're in the neighborhood or they heard the riding's really good. I'm not familiar with economic data that have to do with Missoula in particular, but a study conducted by the University of Montana in Helena recently showed that mountain bikers alone brought $1.6 million a year into Helena based on just their South Hills Trail network. In addition to the direct spending from people visiting town, trails and quality of life are essential in what we've seen in attracting businesses to relocate and invest with high-paying jobs here in Missoula, which continue to build the tax base and our new outdoor recreation economy. Thank you very much. We'd love to register our enthusiastic support of the open space bond making it to the ballot this November. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kevin Farron. I am here to express my support in the bond, and I also am here representing backcountry hunters and anglers, but in the spirit of brevity and trying not to repeat what's already been said, I'm going to just point out that I got married last weekend in Seal Lake. I had guests from 18 states, including Oregon, Utah, Washington, and Colorado. And the thing that everyone had in common was their envy of this place that I get to call home, Missoula County. It wasn't the downtown or the restaurants or the Cabela's that made everyone super jealous. It was the open spaces, the clean waters, the wild places, and them being in basically every direction that we looked. And what really struck me was that those folks from the western states also shared that. You know, they were used to looking up and seeing sprawl in every direction, even though they did have public lands they can go to, not necessarily where they lived. And I think that's what makes Missoula so special. So anyway, just keeping it brief, just urge you guys to think about that and what that means to people coming here to visit, whether they're friends or family, or in my case, a new mother-in-law who may be visiting more because of this, so I might be shooting myself in the foot. But anyway, thank you for hearing us out. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Farron, and congratulations.
Good morning. My name is Nat Sturgis. My wife and I recently moved back to Missoula from Ravalli County, and while I was there, I was privileged to work with the Open Lands Advisory Board for their open space project. I also worked some with the Bitterroot Water Farm on some of their stream and habitat restoration projects. And I also worked with the Bitterroot Mainstem Water Quality Monitoring Project for a few years. So I know that the water coming into Missoula from Ravalli County is in really good shape. I think the same can be said for the Blackfoot and can certainly be said now for the Clark Fork now that the dam and remediation project is finished. I would love to think that in my future and my children's future that the water we send downstream from here will be of the same quality. So I'm urging you to put this measure on the ballot and try to preserve riparian habitat and water recharge areas in Missoula County. And we all live downstream from someplace. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sturgis, and welcome to Missoula County.
My name is Claudia Brown. I'm with Transition Missoula. Thank you for this opportunity to support the open space bond. And actually, the main reason that I support the bond, even though I'm an outdoor person who uses the trails all the time, we need the open space bond to protect agricultural land. Agricultural land is decreasing. It's being developed with houses, with huge lawns. And because climate change is happening, we need local food. Local food is essential for our future well-being. So please put the bond on the ballot. We need it for preserving agricultural land. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown.
Good morning. My name is Tyler Gernant. I'm the Missoula County Treasurer, and I can tell you as the treasurer, I get a lot of complaints about property taxes, as I'm sure you do as well. What I rarely get is people expressing regret over their vote for the library bond, for the parks bond, for the school bonds, or even for the last open space bond. And I think that is ultimately because Missoulians are willing to invest in their values. And as Missoulians, we value our open space. So as you are well aware, you're not being asked to impose a $15 million bond on Missoulians, you're being asked to put one on the ballot. And so I would simply ask that you give Missoulians the opportunity to self-determine what they're willing to invest in. I can tell you for myself, speaking only for myself, I would be happy to vote for this measure were it to appear on the ballot, and I would ask that you place it on the ballot for me to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gernant.
Good morning. I'm Julie Gardner. I'm a local realtor and a citizen who is in favor of the open space bond going on the ballot. I just wanted to share with you a couple of thoughts. As a realtor, I am, of course, very concerned about property taxes. And I know that we have an issue in Missoula that makes it difficult for folks. I agree with Mr. Granat that what we're talking about here is our citizen-initiated bond measures. Those aren't what are causing our property taxes to become unreachable for our citizens. And I think that we find through talking to our citizens that they are, in fact, very proud of supporting these initiatives. This open space bond at $15 million comes out to $1.50 a month for a citizen that owns a $280,000 home. I think that's a really important number to keep in mind. And then when you combine that with what Mr. Keir talked about in terms of the leverage of that amount, this is a very unique tool. Unlike other tax dollars, we're able to take that $1.50 a month that citizens put into this fund and we leverage it up to 4 times so that we can get more projects done. I think that that's another reason that our citizens support this so much. The open space money, as you know, goes into a highly supervised fund. And so by the time projects are brought forward and approved and then the bond is sold, we know that we're getting a very, very valuable project for taxpayers to pay for. I also want to be sure that we point out that this open space money is not going for city parks. We did do a city park bond and we have a beautiful project to show for that, but this is something different. This is conservation lands and open space throughout the county. And I think that's why we know that it's so well supported throughout the county. Finally, I think back to the words of Greg Tollefson when we were speaking about this earlier in the month, and he reminded us that when the open space bond was asked to be put on the ballot and the voters were asked to vote for it in 2006, his words were, "Something magical happened." And I think it's going to be even more magical in this divisive time today. What he said was the citizens came together around it. It passed by 75% in 2006. It was an amazing time. And our feeling here today is that that's going to happen again if you give us the privilege of bringing this bond to the voters. So I'm going to ask, because of the limited time, that for those of people who are here to support the bond, who aren't going to take your time by standing and speaking to you, if they would just please quickly stand up so that you can see, it's a full room of really interested and people who care about this very much. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gardner.
Last time I was here, I knocked this off on the ground, making gestures, and I'll try not to do that again. My name's Rocky Sainert. I'm actually a neighbor of Mr. Tangendal, but we did not conspire to come down here make our comments. But I do think he makes a lot of good points, and I think some other folks have raised some issues. I'm a believer in procedure and substance, and I think I want to address some of these recitals that you're saying you're going to vouch for and vote on here. One of the issues is the connection between the availability of buildable land and bond monies that purport to go out and put conservation easements on land or buy up land that won't be available for housing. It may well be that Frenchtown someday incorporates. It's going to need land for affordable housing, for starter homes, for apartments. They're not going to happen here. We've almost built out the whole thing in Missoula. And I think that you have to consider all the factors of the growth management plan. Of course, this is two of us speaking against it and 100 people behind me saying, let's do it. You've got to consider all these factors. You have to represent all the people, like Susan Kohler said. So I think maybe you should consider amending these recitals to include a provision that says no project funded with this open space bond money will proceed unless it can demonstrate it will be benign on the issue of affordable housing. That's possible for you to do. I also don't understand why $15 million is needed now when $5 million was good at one point, $10 million was good. Why not have an incremental thing? Come back in a few years for another $5 million. See what really happens here. And the other thing I discovered in researching this is that ag land and forest land is not taxable to pay for an open space bond. So all the agriculturalists that you've seen walk up here, and that includes little 3-acre places like Josh Slotnick's place, he doesn't pay anything for open space bonds for Garden City, for his, Clark Fork Organics. And you're willing to give away over $500 and something thousand to a farmer out in Grass, the Dayshaw transaction recently, when if they wanted to preserve that land, all they have to do is put an easement on it of their own or a deed restriction. They can pass that land as farmland however they want to. It's not necessary, so don't come and tell us we have to pay you. If you're a good guy, then do it on your own. We shouldn't have to pay you. And just remember, ag is just another business, and often a money-losing business here. Federal statistics will show that, at least in 2011, a negative $69 million for the agricultural industry here, and only 3% of the local economy in the urban area is dependent on ag. So I think some perspective needs to be gained, and I think you need to do some research. I'm not saying you shouldn't vote, and I'm not against open space, but I think you're saying you have studied the issue, you're recommending this, and I don't think anyone's proven most of the allegations of support. They're just saying, we want it, it's really cool, so why don't we have it? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sainert.
My name is Larry Weeks. I'm a Missoula citizen and a member of Five Valleys Audubon Society. I and Five Valleys support putting the $15 million open space bond issue on the ballot. The open space bond money is used to support conservation easements, and we know that conservation easements support wildlife and birds especially. And I schedule field trips for Five Valleys Audubon, and we occasionally will go to a conservation easement to view the birds because of the bird life there. And I also want to point out that the Smurfit Stone property, although it hasn't, the future of the Smurfit Stone property hasn't been determined yet, I look at that area out there as a tremendous potential for protecting wildlife and public access. And I'm on a committee that's working on that project out there, and I'm going to be looking at restoration and public access. Also, would like to point out that I know people can do a conservation easement without support, but as long as there's open space funds available, I think you're going to get a lot more conservation easements. So anyway, I support you putting the $15 million bond on the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Greetings. My name is Bonnie Buckingham. I'm with the Community Food and Agriculture Coalition, and I'm here speaking in support of putting this bond measure on the ballot in November. As I know you all know, CFAC has advocated for policies to protect our most vital agricultural soils. Our mission is to build a strong local food and farm economy, and we have worked with the county on a number of different planning initiatives throughout the years to really make this happen and to help support it through policy. There's a lot of growth in our local food and farm system in the past decades, and a great deal of that comes from the citizens' interest in knowing where their food comes from and enjoying the open space that ag really provides. And there's a lot to celebrate, and there's also a lot of challenges. And we've heard a lot about that today as far as the juxtaposition of affordable housing and agricultural lands and open space. And I think that we can have both. And I think that, especially in our urban fringe, we're seeing a lot of pressure, and the open space bond is one way to help alleviate some of that pressure to develop. Previous bond funds have conserved over 9,000 acres of agricultural land, including 4,258 acres of our most productive soils. And well-managed ag lands preserve water quality, provide essential ecosystem services such as flood control and wildlife habitat. A deep connection to the land is part of our collective identity and shared sense of place, and we depend on working farms and ranches for sustenance and our shared sense of place. Our open space and working countrysides contributed to cherished cultural amenities like our farmers market, our vibrant downtowns, our colorful restaurants, our beautiful views, which in turn fuel the growing economy and our robust real estate sector. The open space bond fund measures being proposed today will work hand in hand with regulatory and planning tools that may come up in the future to help ensure that voluntary preservation and stewardship of our best agricultural soils can continue with full support of our community. And we have advocated for policies. We've also advocated for a suite of tools, not just regulation. And we feel that both regulation and voluntary preservation do go hand in hand. So I urge your support of this bond. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Buckingham. Additional public comment. Now is your chance. Okay, I will close the public hearing. Are there questions from the commission? I do have a question. I'm not sure who on staff might be able to address it as far as to what extent do folks who own land classified as agriculture pay or not pay for bonds like this? Is there anyone here? Is bond counsel here?
I have the statute.
Okay.
Land classified
Sir, come on up to the microphone if you could.
land which has agricultural classification such as grazing or growing crops is taxed at a fraction, a very small fraction compared to urban land or residential land or land on which houses are placed.
And could you state your name again?
Hang it all.
Okay, and I think my question is more so not just general taxation, but related to a bond issue like this, whether Rocky, did you have something you wanted to share?
Okay. This is MCA 2017, Title 76, Land Resources and Use, Chapter 6, Open Spaces, General Provisions, Powers of Public Bodies, property taxes levied to pay the principal and interest on general obligation bonds issued by a city, town, other municipality or county subject to this chapter may not be levied against the following property. Agricultural lands eligible for valuation, assessment, and taxation as ag land under citation. Forest land as defined by agricultural improvements on ag land referred to in section blah, blah. I looked this up. I mean, I looked at people's tax records. And you, down there under the special assessments, you'll see certain properties, if they're declared ag land, don't pay for the recent $42 million bond, and they don't pay for on the old open space bonds. That includes all of the Weyerhaeuser lands too. They pay all the other county assessments, but they are not assessed on bonds brought forward under an open space designation, which also means the ballparks could have been built as a revenue bond, and they would have been more than likely. But since it was brought forth as under the open space statute, you ended up eliminating a bunch of taxable land that you could have had. So, you know, that disturbs me, because I have 2 acres out in the Tura area that's valued at $77,000. I pay $1,000 tax on that. Now, I'm not picking on Josh Slotnick. It's just I knew that he had some little acreage, and it turned out it was ag designated, and he has a little tiny tax on his, like, well, I've got it here, but I don't want to take the time to find it. He has a place that has 3 acres, 2 of which are his farm. Now I'm going, but he's entitled to it under the law. I'm not saying there's anything wrong here. He produces at least $1,500 of product there. I could do the same thing on mine and get an ag designation. I'm just pointing it out that because of that little bitty piece that could have just been considered a home site doesn't even have to pay for these open space bonds, and neither does the Dayshaw property that got $550,000. So this is not a simple thing here if we're talking about justice. So I hope you might consider not voting on this today, looking into it a little bit more, see if you can come up with some mitigating rules to put in to deal with how you're going to distribute the bond money.
Okay, thank you. Pat O'Haron, did you have something to add?
Thank you, Commissioner. Pat O'Haron, Chief Planning Officer for the county. This issue did come up in 2006 when the bond was passed, and Bond Counsel researched that particular law that Mr. Senate just read to you, and it is accurate that those entities are not taxed under an open space bond. And there is some history as to why that's the case when the enabling legislation for conservation easements was passed. And bond counsel reaffirmed that exemption again this time.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions from the commission, motion, or discussion?
I'd like to make some comments. First, I'd like to thank all of you that have put in a lot of work to get us here today, and that have also, many of you have worked for years to protect habitat, access, and all of those things. You've done the required homework, you've had the community discussions, you've surveyed voters, you have the support of the city council, of businesses, of citizens. So the commission's being asked to put this $15 million open space bond on the ballot and let the voters decide if they want to tax themselves to protect conservation values that'll be outlined in the bond language. The previous open space bonds have, as has been said today, leveraged other sources of money and have allowed the city to purchase important conservation lands close to the city. And in the county, we've protected wildlife habitat, restored important fisheries, connected lands, etc. We've maintained farms and ranches and forest lands. It's been a good investment and it's a good tool. Conservation groups with missions to conserve land, secure access to public lands, enhance watershed, protect habitat, all the things that we've talked about have invested this money wisely across Missoula County. You all have the future in mind as you protect these conservation values. This is a hard vote for me today, though, because it's not because it's not a worthy cause, but because as a county commissioner, I must weigh a variety of community values and needs as I consider additional property taxes. Susan Kohler talked about some of those. Property tax is the only tool the commission has to generate revenue, other than a few pass-through programs from state and federal government and fees that we charge for some services. In 2017, the increased property value assessments from the State Department of Revenue raised property taxes substantially from some, and we received more calls than usual. The Tax Appeal Board had a lot more appeals. And just to maintain the current level of service that we provide across the county has to raise taxes because wages go up, insurance costs go up, asphalt goes up, the price of a dump truck goes up. State and federal dollars continue to decline. Last year, Missoula County had a lot of overtime based on forest fires. While we get reimbursed for some of that, that personnel is not available to do their real job. This year was a flood year, again, and Missoula County has spent about $500,000 in cash so far. And we have to make repairs to county roads and reinforce bridges. The Orchard Home Levy has an estimated $1 million in damage. The county will bear $200,000 of that cost. This is budget season for the county. Other people think it's vacation season. For us, it's budgets. So these numbers are fresh in our minds. People have talked today about the Fort Missoula Regional Park. It was voter approved and we'll have that grand opening later this month. It's already being used. It's beautiful. But the county share of maintenance and operations is over $300,000 a year. That's more than $200,000 from when we had, not as much development out there. And all of those out-of-town users and out-of-country users and out-of-state users that come here do not reduce that number at all, because in Montana, we pay for everything through property tax. Missoula County is a great place to live, and many of you have said open space is part of the reason people love to be here. We have 7 state parks. We have 5 major rivers. We have 3 wilderness areas, 2 national forests, and you got to throw something in. We have 1 ghost town. With the 2006 bond, we protected over, and I think Amber gave some probably different numbers. We protected over 30,000 acres of mostly private land. The population of Missoula County in 2000 was 9,670. In 2017, it was 117,441. So we've grown by over 21,000 people. They need places to live. Our wages don't reflect the cost of housing if you can find something you can afford. Because we're that desired place to live, people are moving here and they have the ability to pay. So I feel like I have to weigh what is the common good, what is the shared or beneficial to the most, what is the interest of all. And I look around the room to see who is not here, whose voice is not being heard. While we did have some who spoke for the elderly and the disabled, there's also the hungry and the homeless and the veterans and those who suffer with mental illness. And we all know that open space is good for all of us. But if I'm going to raise taxes, I must consider who am I helping. If we leave our neighbors behind, what did we gain? Aging services and opportunity industries and other human service agencies don't have the staff or money to go out and poll to get something on the ballot, like the effort that we've had here. The poverty rate in Missoula County is 16% or more, and that means close to 20,000 people are living in poverty. Most of the cuts at the state and national level are in programs that were designed as safety nets for housing, food, health care. But the new idea that we talk about in Washington, D.C. at least, seems to be that somehow those folks are just lazy or choose to live off these programs. We all know that's not true. This was in my AARP magazine. It says, excuse me, the face of poverty isn't who you think. I serve on the board for the Board of Health, Western Montana Mental Health Center, and Child Development Center. So I'm real aware of these cuts. Families face a lot of challenges in Missoula County. Food security, affordable housing, substance abuse, social justice, social equity issues, lack of quality childcare, even being able to afford childcare. We have an aging population. Their ability to age with dignity is important. Folks with disabilities, and the state deciding that a case manager is frivolous. Families are being denied adaptive equipment that allows their children to be more independent, because somebody else could, feed them with a spoon. Hundreds of people are homeless, including families and teens. As you can tell, those are the issues that tear at my heart. Safety, dignity, social determinants of health are a priority, along with income disparity. Both the Montana Constitution and the U.S. Constitution lead in with "we the people." We, together, not independent. In other words, what's the well-being of the least advantaged? I know that none of you in this room feel that you're entitled, but in some ways, if you have a nice home and a wage that you can make that house payment, you are privileged in this county. What has the community said are priorities? Public schools, we passed $158 million. It was important. A new library, $30 million. The majority of that will hit your tax bills this fall. Fort Missoula Regional Parks, the city parks and trails, $42 million. You've also voted over the years for small amounts for the Historical Museum, for weeds, for Missoula Aging Services, for substance abuse prevention. The library also has mills that are dedicated for its operations. My concern is that we survey the public in silos. You've done what we asked, but you're testing messages, you're looking for support, you're listening to hear what people are saying when they say they don't think they do support. You ask how much they're willing to pay for open space. In the past, people asked how much you're willing to pay for a library or a park. What we don't do is ask what your priorities are. Susan Kohler mentioned the survey that the city did recently with an open-ended question about citizen priorities, and housing ranked as the most pressing, followed by taxes being too high. As a society and a community, we need to work for the common good to make sure we, the people, don't leave our neighbors behind. It will take more robust community conversations. It will take different methods of funding, not just adding to the property tax bill. It will need to include a new way to generate money from tourists beyond a bed tax. Missoula Economic Partnership retained Garner Economics to assess the Missoula market for economic development and develop a suggested strategy going forward. And they addressed the sales tax issue. They're from out of state. They can talk about it. For several sessions, a local option tax has been proposed. According to this Garner report, the estimated retail sales for Missoula County in 2017 was $2,365,101,915. So his report shows that if we had a 1/4 cent local option tax, we would generate $5.9 million. If we had a 1 cent tax, we'd generate $23.6 million. Now we have to dig into those numbers and see what that includes. We don't, of course, want to talk about taxing necessities like food and diapers and medicine, but we've got to do something. I think we have to stop putting our head in the sand. The state must have a sales tax discussion, not just a local option discussion. We have a local option tax in Missoula County. When you license your vehicle, you pay it. Generates over $1 million that goes in the county's general fund and helps do lots of things. But have you ever rented a car here? They're licensed in Kalispell and Phillipsburg because our local car rental dealers don't want to invest that local option tax. So that's why I think we need to talk about bigger than local. Of course, it has to be coupled with property tax relief. So that's my soapbox, or my bully pulpit, or whatever you call it. You've done what's required. I will vote to put this on the ballot. But I believe that Missoula County must change how we judge whether to put things on the ballot. We have to address critical issues, life and death issues, quality of life issues, daily things like food and shelter and mental health. The state is not taking leadership on these issues. We must be the leaders. I know all of you want to be part of the solution, so maybe we all have to step out of our comfort zone, our daily focus, what we know, and say to the organizations that help these populations that aren't here today, how can we help? How can we make sure people get meals, that we have people to deliver Meals on Wheels, that we are part of the solution that changes the way that the state funds services to those that are mentally ill or have physical and mental or developmental disabilities, so that the providers can provide the services needed rather than worrying that case management, for example, is not funded. And now there's no one to help somebody fill out the right paperwork to get an apartment. Missoula City and County have always been leaders. We've always shown that we care. We care about people. We care about the land and the water, the air, and our habitat. We pass almost everything we put on the ballot. We all say, okay, I can afford $10 or $20, but it all adds up, and it's especially hard on those folks on fixed incomes. People who bought a house for $50,000 years ago, and now it's assessed at $280,000. The library bond will be added this fall. That's $31 more for a house of a $280,000 house. Just to maintain that current level of service, the commissioners are going to need to increase your property taxes. I'm sure the city will too. I currently pay about $300 a month for property taxes. And my house is old and assessed at $250. 36% goes to schools, but those on a fixed income don't necessarily have $300 a month. Social Security and Social Security disability doesn't go up. Your retirement check doesn't necessarily go up. I get calls from people on fixed incomes that ask, why did you put it on the ballot? You knew it would pass. So we need another way to fund things. I thank you for your passion and for your good work protecting these valuable resources, and I will vote for it, but I hope you'll be part of this conversation.
Thank you, Commissioner Curtis.
Well, I don't know if I can speak, and I certainly can't speak as well as Commissioner Curtis, but I agree with her comments. I'll say a few brief things myself. I'm glad that we're talking about housing affordability in conjunction with this effort. There are examples of communities where open space indeed did contribute to their affordability crisis, but it doesn't have to be that way. And there are examples of communities where that's not the case, and it's been accomplished through thoughtful, proactive project management and planning. And I feel that Missoula is well positioned to do this well and to do it right, as long as we stay vigilant and committed to doing the work. And I do sit on the city's housing policy committee, and the county is involved in doing housing policy, and we're all really working on this issue because we are aware of the fact that this could be a contributing factor, and we don't want to be that community, and I think that we cannot be that community, and I think that with the expertise and people we have to help us along the way here, we can be an example of a success community that actually did do both open space and housing affordability. And I think the open space bond could actually help, especially with the ag mitigation efforts and subdividing in a smart way that maintains agricultural land, can be aided in the efforts. And the way that we spend the money, I think we can be more creative than how we've spent money in the past. I think conservation easements are great, and we've done it in many different ways, but I think looking at different incentives and looking really at the land use planning that goes around how we spend that money can be done even better moving forward and more creatively. Talking about the question of equity and equity across the county, as far as the county residents are considered, we're rare in that we have one incorporated city in the county, and a majority of our population lives in that city. And it does create a very difficult situation for our county residents. I live in Lolo. We've tried to pass a Lolo school bond twice. It has failed. We haven't passed a levy for maintenance in a decade. We just failed a $40,000 maintenance levy at the Lolo school. We can't pass anything. It's very frustrating to live in one of those communities. And then Missoula gets all these great schools and bonds, and it is difficult to swallow as a county resident when your community can't do anything, and Missoula has all these wonderful amenities. But it's a function of our geographic, demographic, political, structural composition. And again, it's rare and maybe even unique in Montana. And so the state's not going to do anything about it. We're in a very difficult situation. And I think that at this point, that's what we have to deal with. Maybe we can be more creative about how we deal with it. And I think that the city passing its own maintenance levy for open space is starting to do that, and we are starting to look more creatively at things. But I do understand the county resident perspective on countywide bonds, and the fact that people feel that the efforts are that the benefits are arguably concentrated in the city when everyone pays for them. At least one thing I think that's positive about the open space bond compared to some of the other ones is that at least half of the money is spent out in the county. You know, there are projects all over the county, Condon, Lolo, everywhere. We have lists of the projects and how the money's been spent specifically. So I do think that this bond, as opposed to some other bonds, does have more equitable spread across the county. And then the equity piece that's not county residents versus city residents, but the equity piece of social and economic equity. I've been reading a lot about putting an equity lens on planning and governance. And Jean,
Sorry.
she does this to me. I wouldn't have cried. I wouldn't have, I'm good. But there's an inherent inequity in the process of getting bonds on the ballot. And I've really been thinking about it quite a bit. How does a bond get to the ballot? It requires organizations and money. You have to have a significant amount of money and an organized body of people to get something to us to be put on the ballot for a bond. And what about the hungry children, the homeless families, the people who work 3 jobs and still can't put milk on the table? What about people who don't have access to mental health and substance abuse treatment because of our collapsed statewide systems for those? What about the elderly and the disabled on fixed incomes? What about the justice issues that our society faces? What about the people who can't come to a 9 a.m. meeting on a Monday morning, or who can't or won't come to any public meeting because they're completely disenfranchised by our system? And those are the people that we don't hear from. Our polls don't poll them. They're just completely left out. And I think that actually is the way the system is set up and something that we need to look at differently moving forward. We need to diversify our income. It is completely unsustainable to only have a one-legged stool of property taxes to sustain all the things that our community and our county needs. We've known it's unsustainable for a long time and nothing's been done, but it's getting to a breaking point where something's going to have to give, and we really need to diversify our revenue streams. We could potentially prioritize differently what goes on the ballot, or prioritize it all. As everyone here knows, what goes on the ballot is first come, first served. First come who had enough money to do a statistically valid poll, and then they come. That's how things get on the ballot to be bonded currently. And maybe we could do different community prioritization efforts and really start looking at how we can apply an equity lens to our ballot and our bonding measures. I won't talk more about it because I think Jean did an absolutely beautiful job of covering what we see daily, the needs of our community are. And open space is a wonderful thing and it's fantastic. But as we sit here and what we see daily, what our community is struggling with, it's hard to balance everything, absolutely. But I do feel that this bond does represent the values of many of our communities, and the community has pulled very highly and asked us to put it on the ballot. These are the people who employ me, and they very strongly want the chance to vote for this or against it. But people want the opportunity to vote as displayed by the polls. So again, I guess that would be.
Is that a motion?
Sure. Do I have to formalize it with the right words?
Sarah, would you like us to read the motion into the record?
Yes.
The full, okay.
All right. So I would move. Are we doing the one that's on this or that? Okay. I would recommend submitting to the qualified electors of Missoula County, Montana, the question of issuing general obligation bonds of the county in the total principal amount of up to $15 million for the purpose of conserving, enjoying, and enhancing open space lands in Missoula County. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Before I make a few comments, something unique to an issue like this, bringing this or getting this on the ballot, is that this vote has to be a unanimous vote as opposed to most of what we vote on, which is a simple majority, which when you're only 3 commissioners, that's 2. So clearly there are a lot of systemic issues related to social justice, environmental justice, how to create equity in our community, and how we accomplish that through taxation, a taxation system that seemingly is broken at the state and national level. When I look at putting this on the ballot, I'm construing fairly narrowly what I'm looking at here today, and that is what is being proposed by the coalition, by community members, something that has public support? And we do ask folks who come before us with items that they would like to see put on the ballot, demonstrate through polling or other means, is there public support? I think those individuals who've been working on this for a while did exactly that, and notwithstanding concerns that maybe some of the polling is not necessarily getting at some of the groups who we feel we need to represent, or some of the polling questions might have been framed differently, I still think there was public support demonstrated through the polling and outreach efforts. Secondly, is the item that we're being asked to put on the ballot or contemplating to put on the ballot of countywide benefit, and does it support future generations? And for me, I think the answer is in the affirmative there. We heard from Denny Iverson, rancher out in the Potomac area, how there is a deep connection between urban and rural. Clearly, the fate of Missoula and the broader area of Missoula County are not independent, but are deeply intertwined. I spent the past few days traveling with my family throughout eastern Montana, from Lame Deer to Circle to Chester and all parts in between. And I suspect that some of the folks in those small communities, small rural areas, might make the same argument that we've heard here that I'm not completely insensitive to, and that is that the urban areas in the state of Montana could, in theory, roll over the rest of the state if there is a consolidated voting block within those urban areas. But for me, it goes back to the fact that everyone sitting in this room is a Missoula County resident. Whether you live in an urban or rural area, our fates are interdependent. We are one Missoula County, just as we are one state of Montana, and as I would hope someday we see ourselves as one United States of America. So because of that, I think this question needs to be put before the voters, and I don't want to second guess the electorate of Missoula County, recognizing that tax burden of all of us is a deep concern of this commission. I've certainly seen my property taxes go up significantly with the Montana Department of Revenue's reassessment and of properties, and also just what we collectively have determined over the years that we want to fund. So with that, any additional discussion on the part of the commission? Seeing none. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, it passes. It will be on the November ballot. And is there any additional business before the commission at this time? We will be in recess.